Listen, I have an idea.
It's how I feel when you make lemonade. Whatever today has given you. 511 headaches, still call it Thanksgiving. True.
Welcome to another edition of the Super Dupa podcast. I'm your host, Rob Griggs, here with the super producer and Kidwood alumni, Es McMahon.
Yes. City champs in baseball. It's a big day,
man.
big win for the Kenwood Broncos today. So I'm pumped up, man. Representing.
Thank you for checking out the Super Duper Pod. We do not take your listens lightly. Make sure you follow us on all socials. What up, Sarah? At Super Duper Pod, SUPA, DUPA, and online at HP53productions.com for our merch. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can get all the videos of us. If you're hearing us on the podcast, get the audio version, you can watch us on YouTube at HP53 Productions. So, as you guys still on the break, right? Still not recording until training camp?
Yes, we're waiting. Well, not till training camp. We're waiting until the end of the high school baseball season. So state playoffs start next week. So we should be back soon.
Hey, did you see the game last night, Indiana, New York?
I saw the ending, yes.
Yeah, so I had it on the Chipmunks, getting them ready and putting stuff away, and I had it on the YouTube TV, like the small one, so I could hear the game. And I was like, oh, it's over. Oh, they're getting a little close. Did he hit his shot? So I saw the shot. Yeah. And I was with Brooklyn, and I came back and I'm like, I saw that it was a 2, but then 1 in overtime. That was pretty crazy, man.
Yeah, great. I think it might be the biggest comeback.
I think it is.
That, from that far behind with it was only like they were down 16
9.
with like.
Well, yeah, and then it was 9 and
it was 9 with like 4 to go, right?
Yeah. It was pretty. They shouldn't have won that game. I guess it was pretty insane. But hey, the playoffs have been great. So if you like me and unlike Ez, you probably enjoy some of these NBA playoffs. But I do see it might be Oklahoma City, Indiana in the finals. I'll enjoy it. The rest of the world might not.
Still game 1. We still got a lot of basketball to play.
Yeah, hopefully so.
But yeah, okay. So Indiana wouldn't be a bad series.
For sports fans, honestly, I think the NBA would prefer anybody versus the Knicks, just because they feel like they're bringing the casual fans and just New York is a big market. But I think those are two good young teams. It'd be great games to watch, great games to play. But I mean, it's been some great playoffs, man. It really has been a fantastic run, and I think we got the old guys out of there, got the young guys in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I figured out what my disdain of basketball is right now.
Okay.
It's that there aren't any like true rivalries in basketball.
Because everybody switches teams. Now. Yeah, that's true.
Everybody switches teams, and I think back in the day, teams there were less teams, so teams played each other more during the regular season, and that sort of built up, what rivalries were. You always had obviously Lakers Celtics, but then you had Sixers Celtics, and you had Celtics Pistons. Yes, Pistons Bulls and Bulls.
I think even
Bulls,
to add to
Knicks.
that, you always they saw each other not just in the regular season but in the playoffs. So like I feel like we played the Knicks every year. Like when the Bulls were on the run, we played the Knicks.
We played them. Yeah, we played them quite a bit. Yeah.
And
playoffs, that rivalry built up. You don't have that now. Indiana and the Knicks, for a while.
That was something. Yeah, that's something, man.
So you don't really have those true rivalries anymore. So I think that's where my fandom has waned in the last few years.
Because see, Golden State Cleveland was probably the last big rivalry that we had. That was like it meant something in the regular season.
That was a good one, yeah.
Because they just met so many times, and LeBron went to LA, and it was like, okay, you know what I'm saying, and they are where they are right now. So,
which did LeBron really need to go to?
No,
LA.
He didn't. I mean, I think that was more lifestyle reasons because he ain't left. He'd been there about 7, 8 years. It's been a minute. He'd been there about 7 years.
I feel like had he stayed in Cleveland, they could have.
Yeah,
they could have figured something out there.
Because it wasn't that bad. It's like he left. You know what I'm saying? And people would have probably still played with him like he's living in LA. But I can understand LA, Cleveland. I mean, he was still, making it happen, but
Man,
I'm sure, I'm
you
sure
getting
LA's a little
super
better.
max. You getting super max dollars, man. And you can't tell me what he's doing entertainment wise. He couldn't do somewhere else. I'm
Well,
just saying.
I know what he could be doing, driving his car in February, right around with the top off. Can't do that in Cleveland.
That's true, but most of the time you're on the road anyway.
Well, hey, still want the option. You still want to know if you want to, I can. Understand? You get that. So we got a good show for you guys today. Dr. Williams, the only Dr. Williams, is joining us on this episode. He actually reached out to us to join to SDP to talk about the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's murder. But before we get to Dr. Williams, a couple of things is I don't know if you've been noticing, man, these prom send-offs. Have you been to a prom send-off?
I haven't been to one. Actually, I'm supposed to go to one. One of my cousins is going on prom.
Yeah. It's like a wedding
But I've
almost
seen, yeah,
now.
I've seen some of
Yeah.
these, if both social media and then driving by, driving around the
Man,
city,
they
seeing
people
these things.
they're building, and I've been to a couple. You know what I'm saying? They building like they sit on thrones, and they got like red carpets, and they got poles. And I'm shout out to Broski, shout out to my niece. She went to prom, and I said, "Bro, this like he was like it costs like a wedding too." You know what I'm saying? It's like, what you gonna do when this is like
Hey,
graduation? It's
you remember your
insane,
prom?
dude. Like, so we had a send off, but guess what? It just people came to the house.
Yeah,
My mother they had some food.
yeah,
And they were just in the house chilling, and I showed up, had my show, my date, we took some pictures. We were
that was it.
we
Gone.
were out of there, bro. People said, "Couple
I
bucks in my pocket." I was out of there.
honestly don't remember much about that night. So, and it's not because I was,
Yeah,
inebriated, because I didn't have nothing to drink that night. But
but
yeah,
yeah, I
nothing.
think they scared us straight about drinking and driving.
Yeah,
At that
yeah.
age. That was out of my mind.
Um, so yeah, not that serious.
I'm with you, and I'm trying to think. Like, I can see why it's a big deal because it's like the first kind of big event getting dressed up as people want to see it. But I mean, it's a fine line I think people are crossing, right? In terms of how big do you make it versus like what fun is it really supposed to be? But I mean, there are also kids who aren't going to prom or don't have lackluster send-offs. I feel like that's not the way to go either. Like I feel like you should do, prom is a big deal. It is a big deal. I think it's like the culmination of your
No, it's not.
senior. You think it's a big deal? Prom is a
It's
big.
not a
Come
big
on,
deal.
man.
No.
How many proms did you go? I went on 5 proms, 5 different proms.
Well, we all couldn't be like you,
Shut up,
Mr.
man.
Mr. Griggs.
I walked right into that. Now
You
I went
sure
to
did.
three
I
junior
went to
proms, two senior
do you
proms.
count wait, do we count junior proms?
Junior prom, yeah, count junior prom. I was 5.
I went on three proms.
See, you on 3. What are you talking about?
But 2 of them were mine though.
2 are mine. I didn't go. I didn't say 5 additional proms. I went total on 5.
I'm just saying, and the one I can I tell
Oh,
can I tell this
probably
story?
not. You see, if you're thinking about it, I wouldn't do
Uh
it. Okay.
I went on someone asked me to go on a neighbor of mine asked
Mhm.
me to take a
Hey,
I,
what's
I
your woman?
guess it may have been a friend of his daughter to prom.
Time out. Okay,
Yeah.
so your neighbor's friend's daughter.
Yes.
Okay, it's like Ezra, you're a nice young man.
Pretty much.
Come take her. Nobody.
So Sheezy the boss he was number one option, but I think
Mhm.
he tore his ACL. Remember that?
Oh yeah. He had the poop dreams.
Yes. I think he
Mhm.
tore his ACL. He couldn't go. And so it went to me.
Next up, next man
Next
up.
up, well, yeah, next man up. I had to step in.
Yeah,
And yeah, so that was the prom. Yeah.
yeah,
That was a good time too. We had a good actually I knew the girl.
yeah. See, one
Not
of the proms I went to was my cousin's. One of they still best friends to this day. Cousin's best friend. I shout out to Sue. That's my girl. So Susan. And I guess she didn't have a date. And my cousin was like, my cousin will go. And I was like, I'll go. And so, they showed up in a limo. I had a suit on. And I mean, it was a blast. I can't front. It was a Whitney Young prom. It was. I had a lot of fun.
that was the yeah, I went to Whitney. It was Whitney Young's
It,
prom.
yeah, it was a junior. Wait, you was at junior prom?
This was the class of '96.
So okay,
Their senior
so
prom.
okay, I went. So it was class '97's junior prom I went to. So
Okay,
we
okay.
yeah. So, but no, it was still a good time. I had a
So
blast. They
so
kicked it too.
my neighbor, he said, "Look, I want you to show her a nice time. You know, he gave me some pocket change. He
Yeah,
said, "Look,
yeah.
take care." He said, "Take care of everything. You know, do me a solid." I said, "Okay, cool." Now, the girl didn't know this.
Well, you had to figure. That's why you couldn't tell it. Okay, got it.
She didn't know. So, and I didn't know she didn't know until, that night.
So you were like,
So,
so nobody like you?
well, no, she was she was a cute girl too.
Sure.
She was nice. So we go to take pictures,
Yeah.
and I guess you had to pay for the pictures there.
Okay.
So I paid. I said she went to go pay for the picture. I said, no, 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 no. I
I'm.
got this.
I see you, Ed. I
I
see you,
got
boy.
this. So I paid. She was like, "What the hell? I mean, you really don't have to do it." It's like, no, no, no. Now, mind you, I didn't tell her that
I got the change for my
he
man. Yeah,
took
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
So took care of that. We went out after the prom, with her friends, and I took care of the meal that we had and the dessert and all that. Took care of that. Limo took care of that, and he told me whatever you got left over at the end of the night, that's yours.
It was like, so we can walk the rest of the way.
And yeah, so
It's a
yeah,
nice night. You know
so I
what I mean? Take
had
off the
yeah,
shoes.
so
It's
I
cool.
think I kept a cool $150. I think it
Hey,
was
that ain't bad.
yeah, it
Hey,
was a
shout
good
out, shout
night.
out to
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was a good
No,
time too. Good time.
I would say my senior prom was a blast, man. Like I still think. I mean, I know you say you don't remember yours. I remember my senior prom, like bits and pieces of it. Just like we were just having a lot of fun. And I remember there's a picture I should have posted of all of us, all the guys. Well, it's two of them, guys on our dates, and then it's all the guys, and we all showing our watches and money, knowing our mamas and daddies just gave us this money. Like my sister's boyfriend at the
Y'all was
time,
just flashing,
flashing
man.
bread at the pictures. And like I had my sister's boyfriend at the time, his watch on, you know what I'm saying? He came by the prom, she's like,
Wait,
hey, wear
were
this
you
watch.
were you wearing a real Movado or a Favado?
I don't know. Well, I
Well,
think
if
he
it
was
was just wait,
it
if
was
it was
his
your
watch.
sister, it was his. If it was his watch, it probably was real.
Yeah, I was like, oh snap. I mean, when I got home, I took everything right off.
See, I
I have
had
no
at
problems.
the time, I remember I had like a Folex.
Well, what's funny, shout out to my aunt Sue. She rented my car for me, man. So, at that time, we was making all our mixtapes. You gotta set the mood right in the
Right,
booth.
right,
You
right,
know what I'm saying?
right.
That's your Dupa baby tape. Man, my aunt bring the car to the house. As ain't no tape deck in the car, bro. I was like, come on, auntie. Yo, you kidding?
Oh,
Yo,
you couldn't do nothing either. Like,
and so when when I pull over, it's WGCI playing. Commercials coming on. Come on, man. Killing my vibe. I appreciate my auntie. The whole time I was like, she got me this joint.
well, you should have said,
My tape
"Hey,
was perfect.
make sure you get a tape deck."
But I'm thinking everybody knows get a tape deck. You know what I'm saying?
Uh,
Jeez. You gonna bring it to me with no tape deck?
well, she
But
probably would say, at least you got a car.
and that's why I ain't say nothing. I knew that's what be very. I ain't tell nobody, ain't tell my parents nothing, because it'd be like, well, we'll hold to take it back. Let me just shut up. GCI is not that bad of a station. We'll be fine, I guess. But shout out to everybody going on prom. Y'all be safe. I mean, I guess people are graduating now, but proms, senior center house are pretty cool, man. But those were the days. Those definitely were the days. And a couple more things. Hey, but Malcolm X's 100th birthday was last
I
week.
saw that. Yeah, the 19th,
Wild, right? Yo,
May
it's pretty
19th.
crazy. Yeah, man. And Malcolm X is somebody we don't, we know, and he's kind of compared to Martin Luther King, but definitely, I learned a lot about Malcolm X through the movie because I peeped it because I saw all the clips about Malcolm, Denzel Washington. Spike Lee got one more like movie coming out together. Have you seen
Okay.
the trailer for this?
No.
I think it's called The Highs and the Highest and the Lows, something like that. But I guess he's a record producer. It looked pretty cool.
Okay.
I think it's their last movie together because Denzel is retiring. But I
He's not
remember,
retiring.
I mean, they keep sliding him checks. He gonna keep going to work.
You do it to death, man.
But I know the autobiography of Malcolm X, that was a big deal by Alex Haley. But you know what I'm saying. Then also when our eighth grade, I think we were eighth grade. I remember my school sent us all to see Malcolm X the movie. You know what I'm saying. And I just remember that just being like, I remember everything about that movie. You know what I'm saying. That's how like it hit me at 13 years old. Just like this is a life to really, he led a real full life, you know what I'm saying? And that's always something you want to think about, like what kind of impact are you leaving on the world? And I remember the
In a
whole
short period of time, he died a young man.
man, Martin Luther King, the same. A lot of people,
Yeah,
that's pretty wild, right? How much they
yeah.
did. And I remember the whole phenomenon of like having X shirts. I remember it was a big deal to wear a
X
hat
hat.
with
Yeah,
X.
absolutely.
That was a political statement, man.
Yeah,
That was something.
yeah.
So it's come a long way. But yeah, happy birthday to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. Late night dog. Malcolm X would have been 100 years old today. So, all right, we're gonna get to it with Dr. Williams. So here we have Around the World with our own Dr. Williams. So today, as always, we got your favorite guest, my favorite guest, my big brother, Dr. Williams, aka Around the World with the World. And so, usually I'm calling him. He said, hey man, I need to get on the pod today. Big bro had to call me, and I'm gonna call myself out because we are discussing the 5th anniversary of the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And it was funny, World, when you called me. I guess when the pandemic happened, I didn't associate it with Memorial Day weekend, even though we were already at home, and that's kind of how you measure a thing.
Yeah.
And when you said, "Baby bro, we got to talk about this 5th year anniversary," and it just kind of and it's funny, that conversation took me back to that time when it was like you just kind of everybody's at home. We didn't
Yeah.
you didn't reorganize your CDs. You didn't
Yeah.
painted every picture you could
You're
paint,
right.
and then this
Exactly.
happens. And
Yeah.
now people are in the streets and people are protesting. You're trying to figure out, how to stay safe and protest. And I never seen anything like that. Man, they got streets locked down. It was
Yeah.
riots, there's trucks everywhere. But there was a lot of stuff going on before that and after that. So definitely glad you are here today to discuss it. So let me ask you then, what prompted you to reach out and say, baby bro, I got to get on the pod today?
I
Let's talk
think two things. One, I got deep roots in Minnesota. I went to
about it.
Macalester College. I went to the University of Minnesota. So, I consider myself an honorary Minnesotan. That's the first thing. Secondly, as I think you may know, I served both members of Congress, former members of Congress, the late Martin Sabo, who was represented Minneapolis, and late Bruce Vento, and of course, one of my personal heroes, the late Paul Wellstone. They all were, members of represent the Minnesota, congressional district. So, my political roots, beyond my Chicago roots, I have really a deep affinity and love for the state of Minnesota, for the Twin Cities, and I've been reflecting on that. And I think thirdly, at the time, when these kind of big moments happen, I often write letters to my children. I'm a historian, so my thing is I want to mark what was in my mind in that moment. And I went back to my essay, which was about, we're all worthy of each other. I think I shared it with you
You did.
just, shortly. And really, I was thinking a lot has not changed. In the moment, there was what I call the postmodern kind of civil rights movement with Black Lives Matters and the emergence of that. Of course, the pandemic is just such a unique and once in a lifetime kind of experience. And so for me, it was my connection to Minnesota, my political kind of training and, upcoming, in terms of the connections that are there and the kind of policy questions that we've missed. And then thirdly, just, when you're writing, you're remembering, as I say all the time, when people forget things, they become forgetful. And it's important in this moment where there are lots of things that can distract us, that we don't forget that it was just a half decade ago that we were right on the precipice of having a truly transforming moment that could sustain change. We didn't get there. We fell short.
Yeah.
But you couldn't tell someone when you saw the protests that emerged across the United States, in big cities, across some of the major cities in Europe, Western Europe in particular, in South Africa, all around the world, George Floyd became a touchstone for the bigger issues that we all know were there. So that's what kind of brought me to that moment. Just
Sure.
again, I'm in the habit of remembering, right? So I'm in the habit of sustaining legacy and memory, and memories aren't sustained by facts, by fiction. They're kind of sustained by facts.
Yeah. And it's funny, like I think what you said was funny in how it's a half a decade and
Mm-hmm.
it's like we're moving along and moving along. And it's funny funny is the wrong word, but we have the Target fast in the same
Yes,
sense that this is happening for reasons that are connected to what happened then. Like when
of course.
this happened, it was Black people getting jobs they never would have got just because
Right,
like
right,
the hours
right.
out there, right? And then
Listen,
and then you fast forward to now, it's like, no, we won't do that no more.
it was like
We don't
DEI
have it.
what? Right? And
Yeah,
here's the thing. That was just 5 years
I
ago,
was
right? So we were asking questions about police accountability. We were asking questions about how to transform the structures that impede people's ability to be fully human and participate in corporate America and public life. And because of how politics are set up, and the ways in which things change, here we are within not 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the whole dialogue has changed, right? Target has changed. Apple has changed. All the commitments about these commitments to, supporting, sustaining, diversity, equity, inclusion are suddenly like, there you don't want that's like the scarlet letter. You don't want to be involved in that.
yeah,
Somebody has to go off to corporate folks like Costco who said pound dirt, we're gonna double down, we're gonna do it. But those other folks who seized the moment, who saw the hot heat of the purpose of those people who were leading the street protests, and those of others who were supporting it intellectually and emotionally and financially, you can see how it turns on a dime, right? That's what I always tell people. That's why I always tell people, if you understand history, you got to ask yourself, why did it change? What happened? What happened? And we can talk about that tonight. But really, the what happened has to do with, you can see just by the shifting sands of public and corporate life, people are not pushing for those things. They're not pushing for the changes there. In fact, they're doing just the opposite.
yeah. And you think about, to that point, went to, obviously, we Perplexity on here, shout out to them. And it talks about, it made a point about federal oversight and reforms, right? So like we talked about, we thought there was going to be some level of reforms that came
Right.
out, and to a degree it did. It just wasn't long.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Juneteenth became a holiday
Right.
after this,
Right. But the reform we needed wasn't Juneteenth.
yeah, I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
low key, high key, a lot of companies still don't celebrate it anyway. They don't
Right.
get
It's a
the
federal
right.
holiday, but Juneteenth was probably the most lasting federal policy that came out. But the George Floyd, issues around police brutality, around civility, around those issues never got the light of day. We never sustained that. We never got to the point where we had a substantive public debate about what it means to hold people with police power, accountable in ways that made sense to the public, right? We got caught up in the semantics like we often do. We're caught up in this current kind of cycle about DEI, but in that moment, we were talking about defund the police and not talking about really accountability. If we had actually seized the moment and said, this is a conversation about accountability, and when I encounter the police, whether I am Black or white or Latino or Asian or queer or wherever I fit in the range of humanity, I should have a similar experience. I shouldn't fear that the outcome might cost me my life or might have some other devastating impact on me. And we never got there. And at the end of the day, we lost the semantical debate, but more importantly, we lost the policy debate. People can't even credibly come into the public space and have a conversation about police accountability in the ways they could. And in fact, I think it was today, or yesterday, that the Trump administration is now withdrawing many of those memos of memorandum about holding Minneapolis, Louisville, and other police departments accountable for the changes they made. Like, they literally said, we're not going to do that. So that's the kind of defeat that is hard to swallow in light of the human cost and the human risk that was involved in that moment.
Yeah. And I'm gonna read a point here, but something I thought about earlier today too. I think that moment in time also shifted the election to a degree, because the election was only a few months away,
right?
And then it became that was such a major point that people just could not deny. It's like, well, we can't put this guy in office, for additional reasons, COVID being one of the big ones.
Oh yeah,
but still it was like, hey, we got to change. He not the right dude to do this at all. And I think because it's so I'll read this here. Legal and political developments. There have been. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong ones. To the point you made, the federal government under the Trump administration recently ended oversight and consent decrees for police departments in cities like Minneapolis and Louisville, despite prior findings of systemic civil rights violations. this is complicated efforts to sustain reforms and ensure accountability. So like even to the point I just made, like he even knew that changed some things for him. I'm
Of
gonna go
course.
back and like almost like correct these quote unquote things and make it smooth sailing for people who agree with me and vote for me. And it's like that's so to me so foul and vile to go back to those places that we've already buried these people. You know what I'm saying? We've grieved
Yeah,
people and now we're going,
figuratively and literally,
yeah,
right?
and now
Right?
we're going back to pretty much dig them up again to, to make it worse and taint the legacies of what really happened there.
Yeah, I would go even further, and I think the argument I would make would be this: that the current discussions about rising crime is really about the refusal of many people in law enforcement to really enforce the laws. Like they say, you know what? If we're going to be held accountable, what we're going to do is we're going to back down. We're not going to engage. And then when we see the response to that disengagement, the cost of that disengagement has been, some spikes in crime in all the key spaces. But that is a direct response to we don't want to be held accountable. We're mad about being held accountable, so we're going to police less. And so when things go up in when crime increases in the Chicago's and in the Seattle's and the St. Louis's and Louisville, then you see some people on the right side of on the conservative side of American society saying, see, look at that. Those cities are going, look at Washington, D.C., you see all these rising crime. What they don't say is, how did policing change? The response to George Floyd should have been better policing, right?
Mhm.
More accountable and transparent policing. But instead, what we got was avoidance about accountability and a level of disengagement that inherently, sociologically, politically, the statistics will say that many in the law enforcement, community decide to police less vigorously, and then throw their hands up and say, "Well, there's more crime, but we can't do anything." There's plenty that you could have done, and the cost of being accountable shouldn't be that we get less policing, that we get less engagement, but that we get better policing, that we're more transparent. Because I think that you could win the public over. You say, "Hey, listen, our work that we're doing is difficult, but it can bear the scrutiny of the public." And what I would say 5 years later is that there was a decision that was made, not in some kind of conspiratorial way, that we don't want our policing to bear the scrutiny. So then we're going to start the questioning the ways, the remedies that have been put forth, defund the police. We're going to focus on that and not on the fact that the reason that people wanted accountability or a different level of accountability reflected the fact that there was a disproportionate number of Black, Latino, working class folks who were encountering the police in a way that no reasonable citizen could have wanted, right? And your response can't be, we're going to police less. It should have been, we're going to police better. We're going to police in a transparent and a more accountable way. Because when we do that, we're going to win the public over and we're going to keep everybody safe. Not that we're going to be okay with encountering the police. Being a police officer is excessively stressful. But
Absolutely.
so is being a firefighter and so is being a teacher. But guess what? Teachers are stressed out, but a teacher can't harm, hit, kill, maim a child in impunity because they have a stressful job. They have a stressful job. And guess what? We all know that it can be dangerous in those ways. Perhaps not dangerous in the same ways that a law enforcement member is, but dangerous enough. You can't say that it's okay to teach less because we have kids in rural, or urban, or suburban areas who we feel less safe about, or they read less, or I get frustrated about, or I'm afraid of them, so I'm going to use violence as a way to reconcile the fears that I have. So, no.
Yeah. And when you think about these 5 years and how intense it was, like, 21, May of 21,
Mm-mm.
May of 22. And like to your point, now I've had the TV, I've been watching the NBA playoffs, to be honest, right?
Yeah, I got you.
But
Yeah.
even then, you knew the anniversary was coming up, people doing exposés on it, people wearing stuff on their backs and all these
Mm-hmm.
protests. And
Mm-hmm.
so and I know as a historian, like I wonder how do you view it? Because I know you have a big more macro view of how it all plays out into the larger landscape and larger world mind. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is your, what do you, I guess, what do you hope will happen? What do you think will happen in the next 5 years as we think about this event? Like, how will it stand the test of time, you think?
I think on the 10th anniversary of George Floyd death, we'll still be having a public conversation about transparency and about accountability.
Yeah.
Because we haven't, again, I'll tell you this every time we meet. The problems don't go away.
Yeah.
So not talking about them doesn't, people of color, women, people in our GTQ plus community, people haven't gotten safer. Right? It isn't like they're safer in their encounters. So unless you remedy it, that's it. So over the next couple of years, you're going to see this continued attack to try to dismantle the things that were the small reforms that were put in place. There'll be a push to try to vanquish them, to marginalize them in the ways that at the federal level and local level have been done by the current, administration of Donald Trump. You'll see that. But I think over time, you got to ask yourself, is the goal here to create a safer society in rural, urban, and suburban communities?
Yeah.
Or is it to ameliorate the fears of certain segments of American society? So we haven't reconciled that. So I think over the next 5 years, we're going to see the continued conversation about them because the issues won't go away. We're going to see less conversation about the inability of people to move legislation. You can't move any federal legislation around police accountability when you don't have Democrats in control. And even if you did, those Democrats are going to be very skittish about raising substantive issues because they're going to say, while we might agree with this, this isn't a winning political issue. It's not a winning political issue because you framed it in a way in which to challenge law enforcement is somehow a way of saying that you're weak, rather than to say, we want to strengthen law enforcement by creating greater accountability. We want to strengthen law enforcement and the ability of law enforcement to serve the public by having greater transparency. Instead, anything that does that says you're trying to cut the police and you're going to lead to spikes in crime, and so we can't have that. So there's going to be there will ultimately be a kind of reckoning that happens, but over the next 5 years, particularly over the time with the Trump administration, we're going to see at best a stalling of those issues, and at worst, a serious regression. We've already seen that. I mean, we see that with what's happening with the agreements among the particular police departments we've talked about. So I don't see a major change happening. At earliest would be whenever we have a new president that's not named Trump.
Yeah. One thing I thought about when I'm preparing for like our episode today is just, because we can recount the event, we know about the, kneeling on the neck and, they're trying to get Derek Chauvin off, which is why.
Exactly.
But, it's just this, just trying to rewrite it. I'm sure as a historian, that has to bug you to have the trying to rewrite history, but,
Listen, let me say this.
Yeah.
Historians do three things. We recreate, we rewrite, and we reinterpret the past. And we recreate the past with sources. So what's great about 2025 is we got visual sources, we got court records. And so people, and of course we have a way to kind of, spread that out and share it with the public that we couldn't in the past. So it makes me crazy to see that people are trying to, remake history and revise what happened. But the reality is that most, fair thinking people, when faced with the visual facts, the audio facts, the technological facts, still are not prepared to publicly say that the murder of George Floyd was justified in any way, and that the person who committed that murder, the person or persons that were involved with that heinous crime, should walk free and be able to engage, in civic society as full citizens, because they denied him his humanity and denied him his citizenship. And so, it makes for uncomfortable political rhetoric when you see people being proposed as potential pardons. But I still think that the facts, the sources, as we say in the history field, can support the idea that there won't be that one would credibly be done, but it'll certainly be attempted.
Absolutely. But even on top of that, right? Just thinking about, so when you think about the election, I know we talked about Trump a lot. We kind of have to. All this stuff is connected, and I feel like as the polls said, a lot of people in different groups started voting for Trump, but particularly like more Black men voted for Trump, so on and so forth. And a lot of it is thinking about the identity of how we view ourselves in America. I feel like, and just like, will there be any justice for us at all, right? Because some people probably they thought the Democrats ain't doing nothing for us anyway.
Don't forget him.
I might as well run with this guy, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
just wonder your thoughts just about how like the murder and the events after the murder of George Floyd kind of
Mm-hmm.
shaped how we view our place in America and if there any be justice at all. Because I feel like we're divided to a degree. Like it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, some people are like, we're still trying to fight for justice. You just gotta figure this thing out. And some people are like, you know what, that fight didn't work. And I'm sure this is as I'm sure civil rights and stuff like this, you know, and I'm sure various examples. But just curious your thoughts on this, man, because I feel like that's a point we don't discuss a lot, like the Black identity post this thing, because it
Mm-hmm.
affected us all, and we all are watching it, and we all could see ourselves, like ourselves, somebody we know, easily being in that situation. You know
Well,
what I'm
I've been in that situation,
saying?
save their life. Listen, I'll say two things. In my essay, one of the things I talked about was this. I used to go to a school in Washington, D.C., and what I loved about the school was when you got past security, the first thing you saw was a quote from the writer Edward P. Jones, which said, "We are all worthy of each other."
Hmm.
And I mentioned that quote from Jones because what the Black Lives Matter, what I call the post-modern civil rights movement did was remind us that we're worthy of each other. Because remember, it's Black Lives Matter, but we know that the people who engaged in social protests, both in the streets and elsewhere, it was multiracial, it was multi-generational. And let me tell you why. It was because we had decided we were all worthy of each other. We had a common ground, the life, the physical body, the physical sacrifice of people like George Floyd remind us of, wait a minute, we're worthy of each other. We can see that this 9-minute murder, that's a public execution of this black man, remind us, we don't think, not only do we not think it's okay, we think it reminds us that, wait a minute, we're worthy of each other. So I can't bring back George Floyd, but I can actually make clear that my position is that I'm going to stand and be an ally with people who believe that this thing was wrong.
Yeah.
And what's happened since then is we forgot that we're worthy of each other. And we forgot there's a common ground that we can coalesce around and that can galvanize us for a particular purpose, right? What George Floyd and the other similar loss of life, those kind of extra legal violence that was perpetrated by the police did was it made plain that we have more in common than we have different. Lots of people were stopped by the police. It isn't, it's the disproportionality that troubles us when it comes to black and brown men and women. But people who are engaged with police, our trust level, our sense of what it means to be transparent, it's like, I can relate to that. And we lost that. And we lost that because we had a couple of things going for it. And you mentioned it. One, we were all pandemic bound. So we had the sense that we could easily galvanize. None of us were being distracted by the things we're distracted by now, going to work, going back to school. We were all kind of similarly situated. The pandemic was a galvanizing factor. The death of Floyd was another galvanizing factor. We lost those things. So our identity didn't change because we still have to negotiate all the things that make us black, brown, that make us, female identified, gender neutral identified human beings, right? So we didn't lose it. We just have other things to distract us from our purpose. And that's the whole point of all the activity of the current, occupant of the White House. And we're distracted and we can't ever get back to that common ground, and we can't get back to the moment where we say, wait a minute, the reason that we're challenging this person is that we actually believe in the idea that we are worthy of each other. And that there aren't groups that are more worthy or less worthy. We're all worthy of each other. And that's such a powerful, uniting notion that if we're all worthy of each other, then it requires us to do something to sustain that for some and protect that for others, right? But if you forget that, if you think really that there really is a difference, that some people are less worthy, then it's okay if the police acts in ways that are illegal and unconstitutional and inhumane. But if we believe that we're all worthy, then it requires us something to do something. And we had the time, the energy, and the purpose to do it in 2020, 2021 and beyond. And we lost that purpose, in this current moment. But it doesn't mean we can't regain it, because guess what? History is not static. It changes. And the conditions on the ground often provide us with the opportunity to get clear about our memory and our purpose.
Yeah. You mentioned Black Lives Matter, man. So a Pew Research study found that support for Black Lives Matter movement dropped from 67% in 2020 to 52% today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just,
Mm-hmm.
and again, these stats are not surprising because, you
They're
saw,
telling.
very, very much so, because I remember when all this happened, you saw signs in people's yards.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter. You knew, depending on the neighborhoods, you knew they weren't black in there, that they were just trying to support the cause.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like now that's almost like a cuss word, depending on how, and that's been co-opted to be a bunch of different other things now, right? And
Right.
so, you just, because even the more we talk about it, I can transport myself back to the time and back to being, feeling just being more pro-black's the wrong word, but it's more like being aware of, what, my place in this world matters, and I gotta make it matter. You know what I'm saying? Because before it was like, let me get my money, let me get my family,
Let me take care of let me take care of my children. Exactly.
but
Those are
then that,
normal human things.
yeah, but then that definitely became, we got to take care of each other, really do.
Hmm.
Like,
And the pandemic allowed the pandemic encouraged that, right? When you ask healthcare workers to make the sacrifices they make, when you ask teachers and families and other workers to basically, deliver us food at risk, we're taking care of each other. We're taking a risk. We're not willing to take those risks now. Some would say we don't take the risk because we don't see the reward. We see the risk and not the reward. We lost that idea, right? That the risk reward balance has been thrown off during the pandemic. During that moment when we were responding to particular things, people felt like the risk is worth it because it could possibly transform our world in a way that would make it better for everyone. And like I said, we've forgotten that.
and
Mm.
how we do when we talk, like, it's not always bad, 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 right?
Mm-mm,
It's
mm-mm,
like,
mm-mm.
so what are some things that maybe we're overlooking, or people tend to overlook when they think about the murder of George Floyd and 5 years later? Like, have there been any changes that we think have worked positively for Black and brown people, or
Let's
nation?
start. Let me say this. I'm probably, you know, um, one of the few people will say this. I go back to this. Joe Biden saved us. It's
Mm.
not cute to say it now. He's had a bad week.
Yeah, yeah.
Listen, but I'll say this. Joe Biden saved the country. His commitment, his willingness to run in a moment and be the only viable candidate. He ran early on. We thought he about to get killed off the show,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And he
yeah.
gets saved in South Carolina, right? He gets redeemed. Okay, so one of the things that changed was that since now we had a moment where we were galvanized. We had a purpose. We had a candidate we could get with. We had an aim, which was to challenge the Trump won. I think it elevated people like, in Georgia, we saw, great, massive, civic engagement in ways that clearly grew out of the pandemic, clearly grew out of our need to kind of find common ground. I think that was really great. I think it was really great. I think the response to those things we know that it was a great thing. We know that voting rights and civic organizing were good things, and having a candidate we could trust was a good thing because the reaction to it was so strong,
Yeah.
right? The we can't let that happen again was so strong. That was very positive. I think that, listen, we had to ask some really hard questions about education, right? So I made the argument at the beginning at the beginning of the pandemic that all this issue about what we're losing and not losing, you know, forgets that there were children who were behind before the pandemic.
Mm.
It is not as if the pandemic was going to suddenly catapult them forward, right? So you were home, but being home doesn't help you if you're in a space or a place where you can't get access to the things that's going to close the gap. So I think we're asking very serious questions about how do we not only hold people accountable, teachers, parents, and school systems, but also saying, here are the things that work, right? So, yes, children, families, teachers got a grace because it was a once in a lifetime issue. But afterwards, none of us were satisfied with the results we got. We don't like that children fell behind. We don't like that we couldn't function the ways that we know how to do to serve kids. That's a positive because had the pandemic not happened, had George Floyd not really, if that issue hadn't become kind of paramount importance, we would have asked fewer questions about how to improve our society in terms of education, in terms of policing, in terms of the economy. And guess what? In terms of
Mhm.
healthcare, right? Our public health system bore a lot of scrutiny and a lot of criticism. But guess what? We had a public debate about everything from vaccines to how to get access to them. We would have never had that conversation about how our systems work if we hadn't had the time, energy, and opportunity to reflect about what things we wanted to go well. We wanted a better system to deal with the needs of people. We wanted better policing. We wanted all things. We were asking questions aloud that maybe we asked off stage. So to me, that's a public discourse change. And it, again, we almost reached the tip. We were on the precipice. We
Yeah.
were right there on the edge, and then the political water shifted, and I think that was unfortunate. And guess what? The same person that I argued a few minutes ago saved us. What we didn't know was that his decline was going to also lead to public confidence about his leadership. Right? We forget what made we forget the remedy that he offered us, the kind of panacea for our concerns and our worries. But the moment we saw, oh man, this is great, but maybe this guy's a little shaky. That's making me nervous. And I need something that's stable, right? I need something that's going to be a certain sure-footed thing. Even if it's bad for me, I'll go with sure-footed over shaky any day of the week.
Yeah.
And so what's improved was our ability to have those conversations, to bear that scrutiny, and to have those painful conversations about what we wanted. And we found out, rightly or wrongly, that Americans were divided about what it looked like to kind of meet the needs of our broader society. Now, some people think that's a bad thing, but I think any public discourse is better than silent discourse. I really do. I think having a debate about knowing where people are, then I can't persuade you if I don't really know what you believe in. If I don't really know what you care about, I can't shift your thinking. I can't challenge it. I can't even offer you a compelling alternative to what you believe to be the right thing. All those things came out because of George Floyd. They came out because of the election.
And I think you said it, man. Like what I think came from it is one. I think it sparked a youth movement, you know, of just young people that were like more civic minded. Because I know in my 20s again, that was kind of the culture around me: get your money, get your bag, do all these things, fly out trip. But these I got to give it to these young people were out there fighting and still fighting. You know, you see
generational. I think the generational leap that rather than talk about civil rights as a black and white movement, I mean black and white in color that was on TV and all the iconic figures, we then had a generation of folks who, guess what, went through the fire of a civil rights movement, a post-civil rights movement. They were about issues that mattered to them. They were urgent, right? You had young people who were talking about urgency. They weren't reacting, they were leading. And you saw them use all the available tools, these new tools, social media and photographs and music to say, hey, we're hearing our elders now. We're trying to speak to those issues and get the same results. We're just using different tools, but our purpose is the same: to transform society, to create this American society in a way in which everybody can participate fully. That was clearly led by young people. There's no doubt about it that generational boost, that generational kind of energy is what drew directly out of it, right? We don't know what would have happened had we not had the pandemic. We don't know what would have happened if there had been a different response to police brutality. What I can tell you is that young people say, you know what? We understand what they're saying, but now we got some different tools to address the concerns that our elders may have raised with us. So there are new issues, because police brutality isn't new, is that the public projection of those issues became made possible by people on different social media platforms, and again, using all available resources to have a public conversation about how to make the country better.
Yeah. And and I think my other point, I liken it to work from home. Before the pandemic, it was like y'all never gonna work from home because y'all won't do nothing. Pandemic happened, people double and tripling their efforts, right? And so what I say to this is that, like, people thought, well, if we offer more to Black people and brown people, they won't work. And here you now, when the murder happens, and then we have this like, okay, we're going to extend, and we're going to extend back and have this like moment of racial somewhat justice, or at least trying to attempt there. It's like the world didn't blow up. Things are moving in the right way. So it's possible now. That means people don't want it. Now you see it's happening because when people making it happen and they don't want it to happen, right? Because even now we're seeing a rollback of it. It's like we were moving in a direction that could have made this whatever the equity we've been fighting for so many hundreds of years is possible. Everything we've been trying to fight for and get is right there.
It's right there. It's right there. And nobody loses anything. And I would say the issue, the kind of faux issue about productivity, we know that people were more productive because guess what? They were working in ways that make sense for them, right? Days got extended. You started early. Yes, did you go and do something you might not normally have done? Go to the store at the time you couldn't. But yeah, but then you on the back end, you were having meetings at 7 and 8, talking with people, feeling like I had a rest, I had a pacing that makes sense.
Yeah.
I believe that the historical record would show that the productivity was better, more efficient in those time periods. We got more work done, and we felt like we were doing good and doing well. We were doing our jobs well, and we were being better citizens.
Yeah.
And the moment required that because we were talking life and death issues. The number of people who lost their life in the pandemic is well documented, and so we had to, necessity really was the mother of invention. We had to come up with better answers to address real concerns that put our families and our communities in peril. And we guess what? And we answered it. We did it. We did it. We found a way to deal with the healthcare crisis. We found a way, in my view, to address the political crisis. It's just that the healthcare issue was, vaccinations and the immunizations are going to sustain themselves more than whoever's in the White House in any given 4 years. But those definitely came out, and that's youth driven, that's technology driven, and that's just structurally different. Like that, the moment demanded us to have new and different answers. And I would say the American people answered the call. They really did. They actually answered the call. And even if people didn't like the debates, like, hey, don't immunize me, I won't be forced, we were still having a debate. And it was across all 50 states. It was one of the few times that you could talk to somebody in Arizona, Idaho, or Vermont, or Florida, and Missouri, and we were all talking about the same things, not agreeing, but we were talking. And what makes America great is when we actually engage. We have a right to dissent. We have a right to question our government. That's a great thing. And we were all doing it in different ways. And we came out in a different space. We really did. We came out in a good space.
Yeah. And I think in the technology piece, you touched on it a few times, like, the whole issue, even in civil rights, when, the whole point was letting the nation see what's happening. So it's like, get the news out here, do something that when they take the photos, people will see, and some people will have a heart and go, this not right. But now we got the full video of this murder happening. And so now to the point, police come around or anything happens, people take out their phones and just record it just because. And think about how many things we've seen, found, discovered, because now that's just now what you do. Some see, you take your phone out and you just
Listen, the young woman who videotaped the murder of George Floyd, she won a Pulitzer Prize, man.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Listen, she won a Pulitzer Prize. Okay, so let me be very clear. This isn't, there's a generation. I'm sometime in that group. It's like, oh, people taking selfies, the kids taking too much pictures. Guess what? She photographed that. It was a narrative that made sense. It was a historical record that made sense. It was a piece of public journalism that made sense. And guess what? It was recognized. She won a Pulitzer Prize, man, for that doggone video, for that story that she told. We couldn't have gotten that. No, there's no New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, LA Times reporter that could have done that. Her story resonated with Americans, and it's what light the fire. Like right now, that space that is a memorial for George Floyd is a piece of public history. It's a sacred space, a sacred civic space. Okay, people are still going there. When you go to South Minneapolis, you're going there. I mean, NPR did a great piece on it, is doing a great piece on it this week. All because there was a great historical record. If there's no record, we're just talking about what happened. We're getting secondhand what happened, right? So I say bravo to technology, bravo to the generation of folks who are in the habit of videotaping. You're right. As soon as something happens, when folks are making those choices, we don't just have one camera. Not everybody has a camera. Everybody. And so there's going to be one of those cameras will say, Robert Griggs, this video is provided by him. It doesn't say New York Times, WLS, NPR. These are individuals who provide us with credible stuff and then giving the public a chance to decide. Are you okay with what you're seeing? Don't take my word for it. Are you okay with what you're seeing? So that's a powerful thing.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, man, I'll leave the floor to you just to kind of leave a lasting thought of, just what's, these 5 years and what you want people to think about as we move forward and into the future and we get to next 5 years of this anniversary.
I thought a lot about this, and this is what I'll tell you. You know, I always draw on the well of historians, and John Hope Franklin said this, that we have a responsibility to tell the unvarnished truth.
Hmm.
And what we have now is the emergence of, not telling the unvarnished truth, but the ambivalent truth. We okay with the ambivalent truth, like to remake history and revise things. So what I want people to think about is that why we were so compelled and galvanized and moved by the murder of George Floyd is because what we had before us was the unvarnished truth. And as ugly and as painful as it was, we were okay with that. What we're not okay with is the ambivalent truth, right? Ambivalence creates confusion. It causes people to stall, but unvarnished truth gives us a chance. It's kind of an act of liberty, right? It's an act of liberation. I'm going to tell you what happened. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you what happened, and then you got to make a choice. Well, guess what? We saw what the choice was with George Floyd. We made a choice. We started a social movement, a national, transnational social movement in response to that unvarnished truth, right? And so now what we have to now is resist the ambivalent truth. That's what I would tell you. Resist the ambivalent truth. We got to do it. And, we have the tools to do it.
So you know how we wrap this up, man. What books you
All
got?
right, man. Listen. So first of all, you need to next time I appear, I won't appear until you put Toya Wolf's book, The Last Summer on State Street, which is about.
I saw that, but wait a minute. I was gonna get the
Don't
book.
see
Okay.
it. Read it. I don't want to
Hey,
see you saw it.
it's somewhere.
Is it over there somewhere? All right.
Nah,
So
I was
listen.
not. I'm
Now
kidding.
listen.
I ain't got
This
it.
book is great. It's set in Robert Taylor Holmes in 1999. It sets out to discover a relationship between four girls, and basically, how does returning to your past, how does returning to your past kind of liberate you? So it's set at the time that they're going to, tear down the projects in that part, tear down Robert Taylor Holmes, what's going to happen, and what happens when these relationships get complicated, right? What do you take with you? What is your legacy? And what happens when you return, as Emil Cabral says, when we return to the source of who we are? What do we learn about ourselves? What do we learn about our life? What do we learn about our city? It's a debut novel. You already got a long list, but this one's a great read. And again, anything that has protagonists there, I think it's a really, really good book. I think Toya Wolf does a great job of capturing Chicago in a way that makes sense. And it was featured, I think her book was one of the books of How Do You Read Chicago? This is a way to read Chicago. This is a book that you read when you're trying to read Chicago, when you want to talk about it. It's a very specific book. Secondly, and more relevant, equally relevant for our tonight's discussion, is there's a book by Jennifer Pan called Failing Social Justice, Why Rich People Love Anti-Racism, right? And it's a critique of all those people who rushed into the vacuum to talk about the millions of dollars, the thousands of dollars they were going to commit in the wake of George Floyd's death. And we're going to have anti-racist campaigns. We're going to have these really clever commercials. And, one of the things that she raises is the question we have to ask in 2025. How did we get from Black Lives Matter to a reluctance about DEI? She answers that question in this book. All right. Selling Social Justice, Why Rich People Love Anti-Racism. Because guess what? It advocates their responsibility. She argues that, guess what? If I can buy anti-racist rhetoric and netter, I can create better consumers, and I don't have to carry the big weight of actually what's the real cost of creating a socially just society, right? That's what happens. You see the same people. You see the Apples and the Metas rush in to talk about what they're going to do, and now we see those same people with the oligarchs sitting there on, at the last inauguration, acting as if they never said those things. They literally never said those things. But there's a reason that they do it. And they do that because, again, they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize their profits. Their corporations, you can make a secret cap all you want. But for them, there's a logic to why they respond to crisis in one way. And they want to co-opt the language, the image, the vision of those things. And, it's why you see protest songs that were once meant one thing in the 1960s and 70s now being used to sell products in ways that weren't intended.
It's still wild how they took woke from us. You know what I mean? Like that was
listen.
How did that happen? That's cool.
Woke, right. So again, the only people who are against woke are people who are asleep. That's what I always tell you. All right. Again, the only people who are against the idea of woke, who really kind of tiptoe around, are the people who want to sleep about the issues about racism, about sexism, about about patriarchy, and about this transphobic world we live in. Of course, you want to be. Of course, you want to be woke about those things. So these two books give you away. One gives you, to me, just the kind of homage to our city in a way that makes sense. Relationships matter. History matters. We get transferred. As long as we don't become forgetful, we can use our history to be a source of strength. And then the kind of pragmatic things, which is that, guess what? Corporations act like corporations. They act in ways that they're self-interested, and they act in ways that reflect the fact that, guess what? If the hot issue is Black Lives Matter, we get on top of it. If it's anti-DEI, we get on top of it, because we got to stay ahead of the curve, because we got to be able to follow the slings and arrows of consumers.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
And so we got The Last Summer on State Street by Toya Wolf, and Selling Social Justice: Why Rich People Love Anti-Racism. Who was the author again?
Jennifer C. Pan.
Jennifer Pan. Okay.
Jennifer C. Pan.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I always appreciate you, man, and I thank you for it, just because our first episode was with you, like about this kind of stuff. One of my first episodes with you about this, I think my first episode, first one was, I called it the personal protest, right? Just about how I chose to protest on my own way, but then you came in the second one and knocked it out the park. So, Lord, I appreciate you supporting this SDP for 5 years. We've been doing this for 5 years.
Hey, man, listen.
Yes.
Hey. I'm listen. At one point, I'm gonna have some gear. I'm gonna make it in the big world, man.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna make it. No, but listen. I thank you. I say this in all seriousness. I love you. I thank you for creating a public space for us to talk about big issues. And for me, creating a historical record that people can come back to, that our children can come back to, that my granddaughters can come back to. I hope one day my granddaughters listeners, and they're able to say, we was talking about those issues, and that they'll pick it up where we are. So we're doing our civic duty. We're talking about the big issues in the moment. And next time we're going to talk about South Africa and all kinds of stuff. I left that out.
That's on the list. I got to get you back on that.
All right, bro, listen, I spent a quarter of a century leading people on trips to South Africa. So we got a lot to talk about South Africa and the myth making around that. But I think for now, the love between us is reflected in the work that we're doing together. And that I thank you for. Like, that's how you show love. You show love by the doing. It's an act, it's a verb, like people say. And we're showing the love that we have each other, man. That means a lot to me. So I'm looking forward to talking with you more. I know we're going to do a lot of good work together. So thank you for doing that for me.
Man, love you, bro. Always praying for you, man. Talk to you soon.
Okay. All right. See you soon, man. Bye-bye.
Do want to thank my big brother, Dr. Williams, for joining us on the Super Duper Pod and always reminding us of what we should do and the things to pay attention to. So I really appreciate him. Make sure you check out those books that he brought us. I still have a long line of books, as that I have not read yet, but they are.
I was gonna say, are they on the shelf behind you?
Yeah, they're on the shelf, not behind me. They're in the living room. So I got them all stacked.
Okay.
Dr. Williams books. Right. So, and before I leave, I think when this show gets published, it'll be my sister's birthday. So shout out to my sister Xanthi. Hey, ZT, happy birthday to you, because we don't wish you happy birthday early. Can't do that. So happy birthday to you. So thank you for checking out the Super Duper Pod. We do not take your listens lightly. Oh, make sure you go see Mission Impossible 8. Going is love that movie. Love all. Do you watch those movies?
I haven't. I didn't see the last one.
Damn.
I didn't see 7.
Chef Kitchen. Make sure you follow us on Instagram to see how I rank all the Mission Impossibles. So make sure you check us out on all socials. SUPADUPAPOD. Online at HP53productions.com and on YouTube at HP53 Productions. Is I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it all.
All right. Make sure you take care of yourselves and each other. Hey, mama, this is the Super Duper Podcast.
Go Broncos.
Champagne from you and I. Wait, you alive? Now that's champagne if you was I. Would you be off on this campaign? Is it suicide? If you know that bringing hope here is how careers die. Or do the K stand for kamikaze? The J silent is everywhere, you can feel them probably. Should've. Lately, I've been up late with demons in my basement trying to get me to hate this. Life thinking I should be further and then I choke up. As soon as I got silent, then the truth spoke up. They said, how you know you ain't perfect? Let that soak up and soak in. You know how you know that you blessed? I woke up.